Oh, my friends, welcome welcome all to a show where we will react to any and all things college football playoff. We have the field set, and the entire day, the SEC, Alabama fans have spent whining. Big 12, ACC fans of simply those who are typically the have-nots in college football has been spent in a relatively celebratory fashion. And anybody who is an actual college football purist, a fan of the sport, a fan of making the sport something great for everybody, this is a good day. This is a good day because we have a field that is all encompassing. It is going to pull in from all different regions. It is going to pull in, obviously, from all different conferences. And it was not just an SEC Big Ten invitational where the big boys got all the advantages. So that is great. We are going to celebrate that here. Obviously, you guys all know that. Around here, we come at this from a non-Power 2 perspective. This show originating from Big 12 country. I do want to talk some about Arizona State's specific draw and what they did to Iowa State in the Big 12 championship game, which, my goodness, have some shame, please, Iowa State. What happened there? But it honestly worked out pretty well, I think, for the conference that Arizona State showed out that impressively. But I want to focus in on a couple of things here. All right. So the narrative, as I said, is very much built around what happened to Alabama, what happened to the SEC. The SEC only gets 3 teams in. Tennessee isn't even hosting, so you only have 2 SEC teams that either have a bye or are hosting. I think the odds on that at the beginning of the season would have been very long if you would have tried to bet on that. And the SEC is here complaining. One, it is something to be celebrated the way this field came out. It is something we may not get much of in the future because Greg Sankey, I'm sure, will get to work ASAP on making sure that this does not happen again. He will do his damnedest to make sure that it does not. So for now, it's a day for the little guy. Everybody should take a moment to celebrate that. On the other part of that, like a more digging in deep on what exactly it is that the SEC is complaining about with this field, I want to point out to everybody that all these cries of how unfair this is to Alabama or the SEC and the schedules they play and all of that, I would just say, welcome to the party. College football has been unfair since the beginning of the sport. This is just you experiencing it for the first time, Alabama and those in the SEC. So that's the problem here. I continue to go to this phrase today because I was reminded of it. Shout out to my guy, Carrington Harrison at 6'10 in Kansas City, but I've heard him use this before. Ain't no fun when the rabbit got the gun. Not as much fun, SEC, when the rabbit has the gun. You're out there hunting rabbits all the time. The one time the rabbit gets the gun and turns it back around on you, man, it doesn't feel so good. And we are seeing a colossal amount of whining coming from the SEC. All right, you guys, if you have been here before, you know the drill on this. Fill up the chat room, obviously. Those who are in, as more and more file in. I anticipate this being a pretty busy, lively show tonight. But if you want to guarantee that your question or comment makes it onto the show tonight, you can click the $ below the chat box to do that. It will create a super chat. So if you send in a super chat, attach a donation to it, it will guarantee that it gets read on the show tonight. I appreciate all of you guys who do that. Could not do it without your support. Genuinely do appreciate that. But even if you can't, easy ways to support. One, just click the like button on the video. That is a very, very easy, free thing to do. Just one click of the mouse. I would appreciate that immensely if you could do that. And Big 12 fans or anybody who wants to read about the Big 12, subscribe to my Open for Business Big 12 newsletter. We are now approaching 3,200 subscribers. If you want Big 12 news straight to your inbox for free 3 times a week, no SEC or Big 10 bias. We're filtering through all of that. You're going to get college football news, but how it relates specifically to the Big 12, everything that matters to your conference. You can subscribe at ofbnews.com. That's ofbnews.com, or simply click the link in the description of the video to do that. If you're a Big 12 basketball fan, I'm continuing right now with the Big 12 Anonymous Player Survey. The last one, which arena has the meanest fans in the Big 12? Got some anonymous opinions on that, and honestly, the winner surprised me. Had double the votes of everybody else, but got some really good quotes. Some really, really good quotes there. Okay, is that all the housekeeping I have? Oh, one more, because this is how we're going to lead in here. I tell you all the time, if you're not able to catch this live, you can still be a part of the show. You can send your question or comment to Venmo at John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo. That is John-Kurtz-4. And if you do that, I will kick off the next show with your question or comment. So I heard earlier today from my guy, Mark. I appreciate you as always, Mark. Thank you so much. Mark says, John, who did it better? The ACC with 2 teams or the Big 12 with a first round bye? It's a very interesting question, Mark. And it is something that I had considered at some point in thinking about all this, because we did have some Big 12 v ACC debate. And you guys know where I stand on that. I would say the conferences are much more similar than they are different. Sagarin ranks the Big 12 ahead of the ACC. Massey's composite rankings rank the Big 12 ahead of the ACC. But they are certainly very, very close to each other. Would you rather be the Big 12 with Arizona State getting a bye in the 4 seed, or would you rather be the ACC with 11 and 12? So you have 2 teams in, double the chances to get a win there, but also you're not just starting in the quarterfinal. You've got to go play first round games, right? Clemson has to go to Texas, and SMU will be going to Penn State. Which was better? I would say you can't really answer that. You can't really answer that because it's going to depend on who gets further into it. Like, it's tough to say right now. Both of those first round games, the ACC teams are going to be an underdog. If it is Texas that advances, Arizona State is going to be a significant underdog, probably a double-digit underdog, I would think, somewhere around 10, 11, 12 points. So if it's all that and it just plays out chalk and everybody loses, I guess you would rather be the Big 12 because you would have a team sticking around later in it and you wouldn't have 2 teams losing. But if some team gets on to the semifinal somehow, then obviously you're going to choose that league. So I think it's not fair to judge it now based on this. It will be based on what happens and who can be a storyline for deeper into the playoff. Like, that's really what it is and what it's about. So I don't mean to cop out there, Mark, but I'm going to need to see what happens. Now, if something crazy happens, if Clemson... the interesting thing that could happen here is Clemson beating Texas and then moving on to play Arizona State. That all of a sudden becomes really fascinating. And then you'll have more of like a direct head-to-head comp to decide who is actually going to do better. I would say that, like, right now it feels about the same, because I think both leagues have about the same sort of level of chances to get past the quarterfinals. I guess I'll put it that way. They have about the same chance. So to be determined. I'll slap it to be determined on that. I see the SEC fans have found the video today. Welcome in, everybody. Thank you for being here. SEC fans, all clicks count the same. So thank you for your support and being here. I'm about to explain why the video is titled Bringing the SEC to Its Knees. Look, guys, it's because all I have seen. Now, some of this, yes, I understand. Twitter is not real life, right? Twitter.com, not real life, never has been, never will be. But all I have seen all day, ever since I just reacted to the post from Greg Byrne, the Alabama AD, all I have seen all day is just swaths of SEC fans. Bama fans, yes, but not just Bama fans. Whining and crying and complaining about what an outrage this is and how it is ruining college football, that the playoff committee would dare put SMU, an AAC team last year, for crying out loud, in the college football playoff ahead of Alabama. That is all I have seen all day. It has been a meltdown. It has been 100% a meltdown. So take it up with your brethren in the SEC. If you don't care, that is fine, but take it up with your brethren in the SEC, because that is all I have seen today. So I'd ask this question as far as that goes. Like, when is the last time that the entire college football world got to just sit back and watch the SEC take an L? Because it does not happen often, man. Ever since, I would say in a post like 2000 and Tim Tebow Florida Gators era, 2008, 9, I guess maybe the Chris Leak team too. you have not seen the SEC take very many L's like this at all. This is a day for the underdog in college football, not just because the SEC took an L, but because a lot of teams that would typically be on the receiving end of some of those L's or poor treatment, not getting access into the tournament, the game, whatever it's been, the vote to determine a college football national champion, are getting some actual love this time around. And to me, that's something to be celebrated. And certainly around here, that is something that is going to be celebrated on this channel. So I would even tell you the SEC took more than just what the obvious L is that meets the eye. And the Big 12, ACC took more than just what the obvious wins are here that meet the eye. Like if you go back to the offseason, I would be very curious about this because maybe there were actual odds on this. I'm not a huge sports bettor, so a lot of you guys that have been around here for a long time know that. I'm not a huge sports bettor, so I didn't know. I wasn't looking around the books, the apps, whatever, at the beginning of the year as to what the odds would have been on the SEC only having 3 teams in the playoff. I'd imagine that would not have been something. Those would have been long odds, right? Had you plunked down $100 on that, you'd probably be getting paid out pretty well right now, I guess is the point there. So not only did Bama get left out here for SMU, but I'm also surprised to see that the committee does not have Tennessee hosting. They're going to have to, now that's an L to the Big Ten. I get that. Tennessee is going to have to go to Ohio State. Thus, again, maybe a minor way to do it, but lessening the SEC's chances here of making as much noise as possible in this playoff. It will be very interesting to see how Georgia progresses as well. If there is going to be a Carson Beck injury, I know you could speculate about whether or not that's going to be good or bad for them if they are without him. And the backup did look pretty solid, I think it is fair to say, against Texas. I understand all of that. But as we sit here, instead of 5 or 6, I would have said in the offseason, 5 or 6 SEC teams in the playoff is more likely than 3. For sure, 5 is, maybe even 6. We saw a year filled with great parity. We saw the playing field continue to be leveled by NIL. I don't think that is going away anytime soon. We'll see how revenue sharing is going to begin to affect it. But I think all of that has been a really positive sign for the future of the sport, that we have seen the level of parity that we actually have here. And the SEC, I don't think, has a really great case here that they should have been given much more love by the committee, no matter what you are seeing from SEC corners. And boy, are we seeing whining from all corners of the SEC world. We're going to start with, well, you know what? I'll start with what I think is the worst type of argument. And what we are seeing here, the worst type of argument, actually comes from a guy that I like, Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl. He's the executive director of the Senior Bowl. But he came out today with, as someone with access to college tape and staff of 11 former NFL scouts that logged hundreds of hours evaluating the college football season, it's easy to see why SEC coaches are upset with the final playoff bracket. Based strictly off of future NFL talent, Alabama, South Carolina, and Ole Miss, and you can even throw in Florida, Texas A&M, and LSU for that matter, are all easily in the top 12. Okay, based strictly off of future NFL talent. Okay, so Jim Nagy thinks we should be putting LSU into this playoff. LSU and all 4 of their losses into this playoff. Florida and all 5 of its losses. Get them into the playoff. SEC ADs now have no incentive for scheduling tough non-conference opponents moving forward, which is too bad for college fans. That whole narrative that has been out there a bunch, I don't understand. And we're about to see even more on that front. But table the part about future non-conference scheduling and what this is going to mean and how the SEC will respond. Table that for now. The first part of this is that is the worst type of argument that you're seeing right now. Why do we play the games then, Jim? Why do we play the games? Shahan Jayaraja from CBS Sports, I thought, had the best response to this, where he just simply asked, do people even like watching the games? Like, do SEC fans enjoy watching college football games? Do they want us to play the games? Or do we just cut it off? I mean, we just had signing day. Do we just cut it off right there take the 24/7 talent composite and decide then and there who plays in the playoff, and we'll just scrap the entire regular season. A lot of discussions these days about the value of the regular season. Well, who needs a regular season? Jim Nagy can just tell us who has the most NFL talent. His staff of 11 former NFL scouts can log hours grinding tape, and they can just tell us who should be in the playoff. Why play the games? It's a futile exercise. I don't know why we do it. Playing the games matters. How big of it? Alabama was a combined 36-point favorite in their games against Vandy and Oklahoma. They lost, and not only that, they lost one of those games by 3 touchdowns. What are we doing here? And there is certainly a lot of that. I mean, I saw a return to the hypothetical SEC analysis. South Carolina, Ole Miss, Alabama would all beat SMU. They beat the brakes off of SMU. What are we doing here? Never mind the fact that Clemson needed a 56-yard field goal to beat SMU literally a week after damn near getting beat or damn near beating South Carolina, right? Took late game heroics from Lenora Sellers. That would suggest that no, that is not in fact correct, that we would get a pretty competitive game between South Carolina and SMU. But yet you'll see it because that's the mode that SEC fans are in. They are knee-jerking back into what is typically their MO, which is just going to the hypothetical, waving that SEC flag, and looking over any warts this year. Now, as to the other part of that, I'm going to turn to Greg Byrne, the athletic director of Alabama, here for this, because he expanded upon what Jim Nagy said there, and this is another popular one that you're seeing today. Greg Byrne says, look, he's disappointed, blah, blah, blah. We had an extremely challenging schedule, and there were 2 games we didn't perform as well as we should have. We have said that we would need to see how strength of schedule would be evaluated by the college football playoff. With this outcome, we will need to assess how many Power 4 non-conference games make sense in the future to put us in the best position to participate in the college football playoff. That is not good for college football. Nick Saban was bloviating about this all over the college football playoff selection show earlier today. You saw a ton of this. My question here is, what part of Alabama's non-conference schedule was an issue for them making the college football playoff this year? I would love to get an answer to that. What part of that was really the issue? It wasn't Wisconsin. It wasn't Mercer. What was the problem with the non-conference schedule that Alabama scheduled this year? I'll give you an answer. It was not. The problem was they lost games in their SEC schedule. They lost at Vanderbilt. They got smacked at Oklahoma. That's the problem. So if you want to fix something, I guess you need to play less conference games now. Scheduling a tougher out-of-conference game, tougher non-conference game may have actually benefited Alabama here, because if they had another data point, if Wisconsin were actually good, or if they had another big-time non-conference game against, pick somebody, Penn State, whoever, and they had that win, that probably gives them enough juice, even with the 3 losses, to still get in over SMU, right? If you had another one there. So it's a pretty comical argument. To me, it's very much trying to, one, be a little bit of a petulant whiner when you're used to getting everything catered to you. And this is very much the rich kid who is finally being denied something, not being given the yacht. Daddy decided not to give you the yacht this time. So, you'll go cry in your mansion. That's basically what's happening here with the SEC and its fans. And I suppose that's fine. They've been kind of trained to do that, nature versus nurture. They have been nurtured to do that by the way college football has treated them over the past 15 years. So I guess it should not be surprising, but it's them trying to leverage their power again here. We hold the cards. We will stop scheduling games. That'll be worse for college football. What? Okay, fine, dude. Hurt your TV partners. I don't care. Schedule less marquee non-conference games. That's fine. I do not care. Your TV partners will be upset. You may get less money from your TV deals. That's fine. The real issue here will be Greg Sankey is going to go power play on this and try to get this changed. as quickly as possible. Now, I see something here from Chris. Chris says, how about Indiana and Penn State's schedule? Indiana and Penn, look, I'll complain about a lot of schedules. Texas's, they didn't beat a team better than 8-4 this year. Indiana, Penn State, I'm with you. But guess what caused all of that? Why do we have these crazy, unbalanced schedules? Why do we have teams like Indiana rolling through the entire year playing really only one team of substance? Why is that? Well, maybe it's because we have 18 and 16 team conferences that really make absolutely no sense at this point. And when you have that many teams, you are simply forced to wind up with crazy imbalances in terms of who's playing who throughout the schedule. You're not going to play everybody, and inevitably somebody, luck of the draw, is going to get an Indiana schedule every year. Multiple somebodies. Texas is going to get that nice kiss of a schedule their first year in the SEC. That will happen because there are too many damn teams. Okay, well, man, John, yeah, that's crazy. It sucks that the SEC has to deal with too many teams being in that conference. Who forced that on them? The Big Ten. Who forced? Well, the Big Ten too, but who started everything by forcing these mega conferences onto everybody? Who did that to the SEC? Oh, that was Greg Sankey and the SEC themselves by taking Texas and Oklahoma in 2021 that kicked off this round of conference realignment that then turned into USC and UCLA to the Big Ten, and then everybody else to the Big Ten, Oregon and Washington. That's right. It was the SEC's greed and lust for more that created these leagues that are too big, that create the unbalanced schedules, like Indiana and Penn State, like Texas, that we all have and are dealing with right now. Wow, imagine that. It was actually the SEC that did it to themselves. And that, again, is why you're complaining about scheduling is falling on deaf ears here to me, Greg Burns. So I'm here to celebrate today the fact that the winners are not the SEC. It is the ACC. I mean, it is hilarious that not only is it the ACC that has knocked the SEC down to whining and groveling today, but it's the fact that, I mean, it's not even really the ACC. It's essentially the AAC. I mean, you guys that are telling me my title is clickbait, I really probably should have titled it the AAC, the American Athletic Conference, brought the SEC to its knees, because you're crying about being left out over a team that just 365 days ago was in the American Athletic Conference. That's who did it. SMU did it by coming in and taking that last spot from you. So suddenly we've got Alabama and the SEC having to worry about the American Athletic Conference. Arizona State getting a bye. Lots of SEC. I'm sure people in the SEC would feel that Tennessee would be like a more worthy, deserving team of getting a bye in the college football playoff. Texas, obviously, more deserving of getting a bye in the college football playoff. Instead, it will be Arizona State. So you've got a Big 12 team that was a former Pac-12 team that just saw its conference disintegrate, and they did not want to leave. They get a little bit of a kiss today by getting themselves into the playoff with a first-round bye. And then, of course, another one of the big winners is Boise. Dude, Boise State is a 3 seed. They get a 3 seed when their best win is over the number 20 team in the country, albeit twice this year. But their best win is over the number 20 team in the country, and they played a grand total of 4 FBS teams with a winning record this year. That is crazy. That is crazy. But it's great. We will celebrate the hell out of that here. It's a good thing for college football in a world where these types of teams do not typically get any sort of advantage. And this is not gifting them a path to the championship or anything like that, but it's simply allowing them some access and maybe giving them an extra nudge that wouldn't typically be there, which I will get to more on that in a moment. That I find it very comical that has been something those in the SEC and big brand world are really complaining about, because again, it's the rich kid finally not just getting something handed to them. But I would also make this point. If we are trying to create the most possible interest in the sport, the betterment of college football for the country at large, this is something that should be celebrated. This is something that should be celebrated. You are getting everybody involved. Right after nuking the Pac-12, you've got multiple former Pac-12 teams in this field. That's a good thing in terms of maintaining some interest out there. It's a very good thing. You've got the Big Ten, you've got the SEC, but you have 5 teams. It's almost, you would have feared like 2/3 to 3/4 of the field would be Big Ten, SEC. Instead, it's 7 of 12. Close to half and half. That's a very good thing. You do not want, for the greater good of the sport, the greater good of interest in the sport, everybody to have the illusion that this is just the Big Ten SEC Invitational with a couple others sprinkled in. Now, that is probably what it's going to turn into, because Greg Sankey, Czar Sankey, Mein Führer Sankey will not like it. So he is going to do whatever he can to change this. And college football generally just doesn't do anything that is in its best interest right now anyway. That's another reason why I really like this. Like, all the sport is doing is things that are killing national interest in the sport and just taking away some of the best things about the sport. Taking away rivalries, getting bedlam out of our lives, taking away Texas and Texas A&M until this year, Kansas and Missouri. You know, I mean, things like that we don't get every year anymore in college football are being ripped away, and we're getting worse and worse with that because we are slaves to the TV networks here. For once, the committee has actually done something that's beneficial for the overall health of the sport. So I love it. SEC, everybody can complain about it. People can complain about whatever it is that they want about this, but I think anybody who is a true college football purist, who is not just simply stumping for their big brand school, their big brand alma mater, can recognize that this is a pretty good thing. And I am very excited to watch this, and it's going to be an amazing, amazing thing for everybody. I'm sorry, Ricky Bobby. We're losing Ricky Bobby, people. If you ain't first, you're last. You're lasting out of the chat. Sorry about that, Ricky Bobby. We will see you later. Eddie, what's up, Eddie? Eddie is in here. Eddie says, hi, buddy. The Big 12 season has been great. Thank you for your weekly words of wisdom. Keep up the good work. Congrats to the new Big 12 champs. I'm rooting for them to win it all. I am too, Eddie. I am too. Arizona State has been a phenomenal story. That was a unbelievably dynamic performance in the Big 12 championship game by, the whole crew. Like, first of all, you didn't even notice that they were missing Jordan Tyson, and that guy is a stud 1,000-yard receiver this year. But like Cam Scatterbo, gashing Iowa State. I know Iowa State. I heard the stat. I think the Solid Verbal guys threw this out there about Iowa State being in the hundreds in the country in terms of where they're ranked in yards before contact allowed as a defense, meaning like offensive lines are kind of blowing them up. And if you give Cam Scatterbo a lot of room to run and a lot of open space, like yards before contact kind of thing, you're going to be in real trouble. And Iowa State found that out very, very quickly on Saturday. So fabulous to watch him work. He is an incredible player, and it's wild that like with 12 minutes left in the fourth quarter, he's like helmet off, just chilling on the sideline, not even having to work anymore. Arizona State has grown a lot. That's the thing. I know it's easy to look at them and be like, that's the last place team. They were picked last in the league. I talked about this the other night. It's a perception problem the Big 12 has. That was the team that was picked last in the Big 12. So how could they possibly be that good? How could this possibly be a good conference if that's the team that wins the conference? But they are good, and they have become much better throughout the season. Like, you could see the growth, and it's really ramped up in the last month. Like, would they have been doing this in October, like early October? I don't think so. Would they have been doing this in September? I don't think so. They really had to ramp up and get to the point where they were going to be at where they're at right now. And they're just playing with so much damn confidence that it'll be fun. It'll be fun to watch them go out there against, we assume Texas. But we shall see. MJB Set 93. What's up, MJB Set 93? Dear Blue Blood, stop playing FCS or start playing 9-game conference schedules. Conferences are too big to fairly determine who is best with 8 games. Well, that's another good point. about anybody who's going to complain about schedules in the SEC or like Texas, getting an easier road. The SEC is only playing 8 conference games. So that even, further limits you in terms of making sure that there is going to be a more equitable scheduling philosophy for everybody involved. That will definitely make that problem even worse, is in essence what you have there. So I'm with you. I did hear Nick Saban today said maybe the SEC needs to start playing 10-game conference schedules. I don't know. I guess if it's going to move the SEC toward that, maybe this is all a good thing. Greg Byrne is out here telling us that it's a bad thing. Greg Byrne, by the way, that tweet that I showed you of his, it got community noted. It got community noted, which means basically there are enough people correcting it and saying, hey, man, you're wrong here, that it got like an official community note put on it. Very, very funny. Very funny. Appreciate you, MJB set. DZ Low. What's up, DZ Low? DZ Low says maybe the SEC shouldn't have added Texas and Oklahoma. Then Bama wouldn't have lost to Oklahoma. Who'd have thunk it? Well, now there is a good point, too. I had not considered it that way, DZ Low 785. If the Oklahoma game is what sunk Alabama, didn't have to have them in your conference. Didn't have to have them, but you went out and did that. Very, very true. Very true. Jason, thinking the alternate broadcast location today. Well, the initial reaction broadcast that I had earlier, that was not here. I was not at my place. So got a new one in there. And here, it's still the same. I just kind of cleaned up the background. I just narrowed everything down to one bookshelf instead of the 2 that we had before. I may still tinker with it because when I don't have the overlay, it looks a little barren. But I think with the overlay, it looks fine. So thank you for that. Making some tweaks, trying to make this look as good as possible. MJB set 93. Do we want an SEC v Big Ten Invitational or an FBS playoff? Seriously. Army not even considered with 1 loss. Is Boise really better? Stop whining A. I'm not sure what the A is there. I think everybody outside of SEC or perhaps Big Ten country, this doesn't seem to be quite as strong in the Big Ten. I think everybody outside of the South would definitely prefer that it be an actual invitational across the entire landscape of college football as opposed to just one for the SEC and Big Ten. Army, I'll be honest, I have not looked at the specific metrics for Army, like strength of schedule, whatever. I don't think that Army would be somebody that I would have considered. The only time I really watched them this year, in fairness, was playing Notre Dame. I guess if you wanted to have the argument hey, should we compare Army and Boise? Maybe. I would be interested to see how their resume compares specifically with Boise, considering that they are both G5s. And so that would be a more comparable overall schedule that you'd be comparing. One played Oregon, one played Notre Dame. But part of your problem there is going to be, Boise fought tooth and nail with Oregon. Meanwhile, Army just got obliterated by Notre Dame when they played, and that was fresh on everybody's mind here. So Army got some consideration before that Notre Dame game. You remember, the original conversation about the Big 12 perhaps not getting anybody in started with it being about what was happening with Army and how that was developing. Hey, Boise and Army could both jump in front of the Big 12 champ. That was a conversation at one point. Alan, what's up, Alan? Alan says, go Big 12 champ Sun Devils. If ASU can win 2 games, the Big 12 will beat the SEC, the top SEC and Big 10 teams. What's the inside story on Jeff Grimes? Excited to see Jalen return to our new stadium. Yes, Alan, our Kansas fan around here, most prominent Kansas fan around here. If Arizona State can win 2 games, I mean, that's a massive, massive if. That will be a heavy lift and very difficult. But if Arizona State can win 1 game, that would do a world of good for the Big 12. And it does set up for a really, really fun possibility there, because if they are winning 1 game, it's probably coming against Texas. And for the Big 12 and Big 12 fans to be able to get a win over Texas in the playoff, in the first year of the expanded playoff, in the first year that Texas is out of the conference, that's a big time feather in the cap to get. So it sets up a massive opportunity for the league for sure. But with Kansas, I don't know the full inside story on Jeff Grimes. I don't know if that was him being told, like, hey, find another job. Kind of crazy if so, because he's sort of failing upward to go to Wisconsin. Jalen Daniels does not surprise me that he came back, because I just imagined the market for Jalen Daniels at this point after the season he had, even though he finished very strong, probably had cooled some. So I don't know that the transfer market would have been piping hot for him if he was actually trying to leave and do something different there. So it made a lot of sense to me that he would come back. That'll be a big help for Kansas, because they're going to have some real personnel losses there. I mean, that entire backfield now with Savion Morrison leaving is going to be gone. I know the receivers, that was a veteran group of receivers. Like, there will be a lot of change with Kansas this year, and it will be very helpful for them to have Jalen Daniels back. Okay, if you guys want to be a part of the show, make sure your question or comment gets on the show tonight. Click the $ below the chat box, submit a super chat in order to do that. Have any of the SEC fans stuck around? Anybody still here in the chat? Anybody? Because I do have something else that they may not love all that much. There is a lot of whining, as I mentioned many a time here on the show so far, about what happened to the SEC and what happened specifically to Alabama. But what's ironic about all of this is that the rallying cry that you're basically hearing from them is, well, it's not fair. Things are not fair. It's very ironic to hear the haves of the college football world complaining about how things are not fair because Alabama got left out in favor of SMU, because the SEC only has 3 teams in. College football has always been unfair. Newsflash to any Alabama fans out there, or Greg Byrne, the AD at Alabama, or Greg Sankey, obviously the commissioner of the SEC. College football has never, ever, ever, ever been fair. Inequity has been a staple of college football, and in a lot of ways, that's a part of what makes us love the sport and creates the endless arguments that we always have about the sport. But why you're seeing all this complaining about it right now is because of the simple fact, as I said earlier, ain't no fun when the rabbit got the gun. And the rabbit has the gun here. The SEC does not have it. So you're getting complaining about SMU. You're getting complaining about auto buys for the conference champs. I have seen a lot of that. You guys know I really like and respect Josh Pate. I listen to him a lot. He complains about that frequently, that we're giving auto buys to the top 4 conference champs, which means Boise and Arizona State both get an auto buy. I mean, hell, if you were watching the college football playoff selection show earlier today, you heard Reese Davis say this. Reese Davis, his role on there is the straight man. He's not supposed to be giving a bunch of opinions. Like, he's the point guard, leading things in and out. He's not the guy dunking or shooting. He's distributing. He is the straight man there. And yet, he dropped in this comment. I think everybody hopes this is just a one-year thing. Just seed them by ranking. Don't give the automatic buys to the champions. Reese Davis, the guy doing the show on ESPN, put that out there. Greg Sankey got to him fast, man. I mean, you guys thought Big 12 overlord Karen a couple of years ago was getting to me fast with all the talking points for the Big 12 SEC stuff. No. Greg Sankey's got everybody on speed dial, man. If he had Reese Davis doing that during the show, that's crazy. So what a Reese Davis would want, what a Josh Pate would want here is you would have 1 through 4 with the buys being Oregon, Georgia, Texas, and Penn State. And instead, they have to live with Oregon, Georgia, Boise State, Arizona State. That's the crime against humanity that we have there. A lot of complaining as well about Oregon having debatably a tougher road with the 1 seed than Penn State with the 6 seed, depending on how you view the actual value of a bye. And that one, I can at least understand a little bit more. I understand the point that you are making with that. Does that seem a little bit unfair to Oregon? Yes, I can level with you and say that that does seem a little bit unfair to Oregon. But I go back to my original statement here, and that is, when has college football ever been fair? When has college football ever cared about making things equitable and fair? Yes, what we have with this field is something that makes things a little bit tougher for some of the big boys. They're not getting completely fully rewarded the way that they think they should. But you know what? Welcome to life for everybody that has not been a powerful big brand in college football for the entire history of the sport. Welcome to it. It is like the great gif. It's like that James Franco pirate gif that's out there where one guy walks up next to him and he turns over to him and says, "First time?" That's the rest of the college football world right now, to Alabama, to the SEC. First time? Oregon? First time? Now, Oregon, I understand throughout the history of college football, doesn't have as much. They're in a bit of a different spot. But Oregon has been well-resourced and one of the bigger brands in college football for a while now, so they still somewhat fit into this discussion. But think back through college football history. When has college football ever had like a fair, equitable way for everybody to declare a champion? When has that happened? We used to literally have just people vote on who they thought was best. We had no championship game, no playoff, no nothing. You went to these bowls with different tie-ins from different conferences. You didn't really have a lot of control over where you were going or who you were playing. And then we would just say, hey, all you media guys that, pay attention to the game. But in those days when we were still just voting on champions, impossible to be like watching every game, right? There's no quad box on YouTube TV in 1994 to determine a champion. But that's what you did. You had to do it without actually watching these teams. How fair was that? That was the way that we chose the national champion in college football. Then we decided to move to, all right, well, here's a computer. It's going to take a bunch of numbers, chew them up, spit them out, and it will give you the top two. It'll give you the top two teams, and those will be who play for the national championship. I mean, okay, I guess maybe a little bit better in some ways, but I don't know. Ask 2011 Oklahoma State how fair that was, that we did it that way with a computer. So, yeah, when you do it that way, when you have people voting, you've got coaches voting. By the way, I didn't even mention, hey, yeah, obviously the AP is picking one national champ. The coaches have a poll. They'll pick another. These coaches with all their different biases and what conferences they're coming from and all of that. Grudges that they may be holding against somebody else. You're leaving all that in their hands to pick the national champions. How many unfair things happened along the way with all of that? How many unfair things to teams that may not have been the bigger brand happened along the way? Just post BCS era. I said Oklahoma State, they get jumped by Alabama in 2011 by just minuscule percentage points according to the BCS formula. They get left out of the national championship game. Alabama gets to go to the national championship game. 2014, TCU is the 3 seed in the in the penultimate college football playoff rankings, the next to last. They beat Iowa State 55-3, and they drop 3 spots. They're out. Ohio State is in. Just last year. And this is even Florida State. Florida State is even a team that has had a lot of history, right? Florida State gets left out in favor of one-loss Alabama when they are an unbeaten. That seems pretty unfair. So wait, you're telling me Alabama, Ohio State, Alabama benefited from all these situations, and now Alabama's getting a bit of a bad break? Man, that is tough. That is tough. Tough. I do not feel bad at all. This is what the sport is. But the problem for everybody that's reacting poorly today is that it's swung around on the other side. They are not used to being the ones on the losing end of this. So welcome to what college football has been like for everybody else. If the bigger brands are going to get a slightly tougher path, or there's been a little bit of deferential treatment to some brands that typically would not get that, deal with it. And it will probably only be something that you deal with for a year or two max, because the guy that's got you, Overlord Sankey, he'll take care of it. It'll change, and you won't have to deal with it for very long. But forgive me for relishing in the fact that for once, the way this sport has always been conducted, you have to wear the shoe on the other foot, or the shoe is on the other foot in this scenario. And by the way, I would also tell you this is in some ways in your better long-term interest because it will keep more interest in the sport nationally, which if you pull away and do your own thing, we've discussed this many a time, Big Ten, SEC invitational type of thing, you are going to lose a lot over time. There will be diminishing returns, and it will hurt you long-term as much as it is hurting everybody else. I love this. I'm going to get to the Super Chats in just a moment, but I love this. Clint, one day you're in the college football playoff, the next day you wake up in the Pop-Tart Bowl. That's a great comment. That is a great, great comment. Thank you for that, Clint. That made me laugh. So we got a Texas fan in here. Thank you for that, Texas fan. Texas fan, you know why we are talking SEC? Not you saying get you Super Chats. Honestly, Super Chat's a little lighter probably than normal on a Sunday show here tonight. So it's not that, but what it does do is it draws SEC fans like you in here. You're clicking the video. So, ergo, it does help to talk about the SEC in that respect. But you guys are the main character today. So congratulations. David, what's up, David? David says Bama AD saying they will rethink their non-conference scheduling. Wasn't it 2 conference games that cost them the college football playoff? Yes, it was. Now, I know the counter will be, yeah, John, but they're saying that we know the SEC schedule is going to be tough because we are the greatest country in all the land. We know the SEC schedule will be tough, so why put tough non-conference games there too when we know it's just all going to be about wins and losses in the end, like whatever the number is in the win column and the loss column. They'll give you some of that, whatever. Again, I would just say, hey, if that's what you want to do, go do it. That's fine. But I would still try to beat 6-win Oklahoma and Vandy. I would still try to make sure you take care of those games more so than anything else. If you want to hurt your TV deal by playing less marquee non-conference games, be my guest, knock yourself out. That's fine. That is, in terms of things that are bad for college football, that is very low on the list of things that are happening right now in the sport that are bad for college football. So I'm not going to be too concerned about that. Daniel, what's up, Daniel? Daniel says, FSU fans to Alabama today. Karma is a B. You are correct. FSU fans, I know you guys are loving this today. I know you are. MJB Sets says no auto bids until 4-loss SEC Big Ten or Big Ten champ is on the road in the first round versus G5. Okay, no auto bids. I'm a little confused here by what you're saying. Your prediction is that 4-loss SEC or Big Ten champ on the first. I mean, I guess I get where you're going with just the fact that it would take something. You think that the auto bids are going to go away. I got to be honest, MJB Set, and maybe this is just me being an idiot and not being able to think on the fly. I'm not quite catching what you're saying here. No auto bids until a 4-loss SEC or Big Ten champ is on. Okay. If we get to the point where a 4-loss SEC or Big Ten champ is on the road in the first round against a group of 5, then we would go back to auto bids. Okay. I got it. So it would take an SEC champion that has 4 losses having to go on the road on the first round against the G5 team to get the auto bid. Okay. Got it. Well, I will say this, SEC fans that are in here, I don't think there would ever be a 4-loss SEC champion. I don't think that would ever happen. I don't think your league would ever have to deal with that. So there. Okay. Click the $ below the chat box if you do want to submit a super chat and make sure that you get on the show tonight. I'm seeing a lot of people, why is there not more talk about, I saw a comment earlier, like, why is there not more talk about Big 12 bowl games? Look, no offense. I love the Big 12 as much as many of you here in this chat. We can talk about the bowl games. We certainly can. We will have plenty of time to do so throughout the month of December. I am not real fired up about bowl games, especially when we have this 12-team playoff for the first time in history, and it gives us so much meat on the bone to talk about. I would much rather be talking about that and all of the interesting storylines around that and what we're seeing today than I would Big 12 bowl games. Now, if you want to talk more about Arizona State's specific draw, what it can mean for the conference, what they can do, that is something we can definitely talk about. Part of the problem here for Arizona State is that they are going to be without their best defensive player. You saw the targeting penalty, which was probably warranted. Definitely could have made that hit lower on Rocco Becht. Because of that, Arizona State is going to be without its second best offensive player and its best defensive player for the first half, and they will be without Jordan Tyson, obviously, who was the second best offensive player for the entire game against presumably Texas, perhaps Clemson, when they're playing that in the Peach Bowl. That is rough. That does suck. That is tough. I definitely worry about Texas's defense and what that will do to Arizona State. If they can because Iowa State couldn't stop Cam Scatterbo. They were a team that didn't stop the run very well all year. They struggled against virtually everybody, except, ironically, my K-State Wildcats there at the end of the year. They struggled against virtually everybody trying to stop the run. RJ Harvey had a crazy game. Ja'Curry Brown, like the one thing he did for UCF this year was rip off almost 200 yards rushing against Iowa State. Maybe it was more like 140, 150. But he had a huge game rushing against them. Iowa State really struggled to defend the run. Texas is not going to do that. Say what you will about their schedule. They didn't beat anybody with more than 8 wins, but the defense was pretty damn dominant. And you saw a real defensive slugfest with Georgia in the SEC championship game. That Texas defense is going to be a completely different beast for Cam Scatterbo and company, and that is where I think they will really miss Jordan Tyson. So if you want to know my true thoughts here, like, it is very fun that Arizona State has the potential ceiling of getting a win over Texas and putting that flag down for the Big 12 a year after Texas bailed on your league and won it on the way out. That would be huge. It would be amazing. And I love Arizona State. I believe in Kenny Dillingham. I love everything that is happening there right now. But if you're wanting me to predict a win there, it's really tough for me to see, because if Texas can just zero in on Scatterbo, I think it could be a definitely a long day. A long day for Arizona State there. Now, Sam Levitt can help out, and that guy not only just has some real moxie and can sling it a bit, but he's just really shifty and gritty and finds ways with his legs. I'm very, very impressed by him. They'll have a lot of time. They will have a lot of time to try and figure out, scheme something up, and I believe in Dillingham and Arroyo. I mean, the quote from Kenny Dillingham after the game about Marcus Arroyo on that 4th down early, it was a 4th and 1, and they threw a 63-yard pass. And Dillingham was just like, man, I looked at him and was like, oh, crap. All right, here we go. Do it. That's the type of coaching it will take to beat Texas. Like, I like Dillingham's attitude. He's almost like too young and naive in some ways to be really intimidated or awed by the moment, I think. And so I like that. I like that about him. I think there is a lot to like there. And I'm seeing you guys saying that, hey, Clemson, it's not going to be a foregone conclusion that Clemson loses to Texas. I don't know. I feel like Clemson in a lot of ways got gifted the ACC championship game because SMU was just not ready for the moment and a turnover machine at the beginning of the game and just like handed them 14 points. I think that was really why SMU lost the game. And then you saw over the course of the rest of the game, like SMU was the better team. So I don't have much faith in Clemson beating Texas. I'll put it that way. They're also having to go on the road. So I don't think I'm certainly not going to be counting on that. Clemson doing that. I think it would take a real dud from Texas for that to open up anything there. So I anticipate very much so that it will be Arizona State and Texas in the Peach Bowl. But I definitely worry about the hits, like the sort of a death by 1,000 cuts thing with Arizona State at this point, where like they're a very good team. They have a lot going for them, but they are not so overrun with talent that they can withstand a lot of these hits to some of their best players, to some of their frontline players. And like that is where we can start to harken back to, again, the preseason prognostication. I mean, they were picked 16th in the Big 12. Clearly, they are much better than that. But you're not going to have a roster completely overflowing with depth and talent everywhere if you are picked 16th in a conference to start the year. So if you're telling me, all right, there goes your best defensive player, There goes your second best offensive player. Now try to go out there and beat a defense like Texas. It's going to be tough. That's my initial take on what Arizona State has as a draw. But I'm thrilled to go see it happen. I trust that Dillingham can make it competitive. I trust that Scatterboot can make it competitive. And just the overall playoff, man. I mean, I'm thrilled for the state of Indiana. The state of Indiana gets to see basically a state championship game there, with Indiana going to Notre Dame, which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, has not happened since the 90s. So, we've got some good stuff. SMU Penn State, I do think, can be a very good game. If that were a neutral site game, I would really believe it. I do feel like SMU may struggle with that environment because in the ACC this year, they did not see an environment like what they are going to get in Happy Valley. I think that's really like the biggest thing. I see. Yeah. Shamari Simmons. I'm seeing some of you guys comment on this. Shamari Simmons lost in the first half is brutal. That is the thing. I have not seen much talk about that. 7X. Like it seems like Big 12, the focus has just been so much more on the playoff and what was going to happen with ASU. Would they get a bye? There has not been enough talk about that. Because I do think that's a big deal. And especially when that happened in a moment, like the game's already out of hand. It wasn't like a significantly impactful play. And I'm not saying that like Dillingham should have had him out of the game or whatever, anything like that. But if you look at both of those injuries, situations, Jordan Tyson gets hurt when the game was already well in hand with Arizona. Again, probably still too early that I'm not going to blame Dillingham for still having him in the game. But it's like, God, that was unnecessary. Didn't need to have him in there. And then with Simmons, it's like, the game's already, it's done. You don't need that. And now he's going to be out for the first half. So, yeah, that's tough. That's really, really tough. Let's see. Am I missing a super chat? No, I am not. I had MJB sets. So, okay. We've done that. I promise we've got 2 weeks here before these games, right, to talk about much more of this. We've got even an extra week before we would be getting this Arizona State game. They're not going to be playing until after Christmas. But we've got to talk about coaching news, okay? Coaching carousel, if you will, but if you're a Big 12 fan, we have like major coaching stuff going on at UCF, Utah, Oklahoma State, and West Virginia all right now. And this is pretty fascinating to me, everything that's going on. I have to start with UCF, though. And I know UCF, you guys are in a good mood right now. Frost warning. Scott Frost is coming back after leaving in 2017. And I hate to rain on the parade, my friends. I really do. I don't want to be that guy. I was with you all in the offseason. I was higher on UCF than most. I jumped on the Gus bus. I was all about it, my friends. I really was. But I'm going to have to rain on your parade a little bit here with Scott Frost. I think this is such a boom or bust hire, and it really scares me about what this could be for UCF, okay? I know a lot of you have told me, I asked on Twitter, and thank you to everybody who responded, like UCF fans, how you feeling about this? And I got overwhelmingly positive responses there about where people were at. And I had a lot of people telling me, he's going to restore the culture. He brings such a great culture. And also, who out there was, overwhelmingly good? Like, who would have been the knockout hire that you're saying we should have gone with instead? To which my response would be, yeah, I think you're missing the point if that's what you're saying and doing. You need a good ball coach. And UCF does strike me as a place with how brash it is, and I think that's good for the program, how brash it is, how much they really want to win. That also can be dangerous sometimes. I'm not equating this hire to this level. I don't think it's that bad. But like Kansas was a place that for a while I thought was just, they were too locked in on football and like, hey, we're Kansas. We should let's get a big, sexy name. Instead of a good ball coach, let's get a big, sexy name. And they went out and they hired Charlie Weiss. And that was predictably a disaster. And then they went out and, hey, we can get a guy who won a national championship. And here comes Les Miles. And that was an even bigger disaster. Then they finally just said, hey, let's go find a ball coach. And Travis Goff, to his credit, went and found, hey, here's this guy that's like won everywhere at every level, and he's like turning around. He's winning in Buffalo, New York. And they hire Lance Leipold, and look what happens. You need a good ball coach, not a sexy name. So, all right, was there like a sexy name that made a ton of sense outside of Scott Frost, I suppose? Like, no, but I don't think that's the point. I think you go find the best dude. Now, Terry Mohajir's an AD that I have a lot of respect for. He went out and did his search. Apparently there wasn't anybody that excited him more than Scott Frost, and that's okay. That's fine. I would just be worried about the floor with this thing. If it works out, it's great. It's clearly re-energized the fan base immediately. Like, that happened right away. And if he comes back and does it again, what a story, man. Guy leaves after the unbeaten season in 2017, claiming a national championship. It seemed like he was very torn up and conflicted about having to leave for Nebraska. Gets to come back and do right by everybody in this comeback story and lead them into the new Big 12 and capitalize on all the fertile recruiting ground that you're sitting in the middle of. I get it. A lot of upside there. But how about the downside, man? I mean, yes, he went 19-7 in 2 years at UCF, including the 13-0 season. But then he went to Nebraska, and he was 16-31, guys. Like, Nebraska has been bad for like 15 years at this point. But, I mean, Frost was really bad. Really bad. 16-31. He went 10-26 in the Big Ten. He lost 2.5 times more Big Ten games than he won in 5 years. Did not go to a bowl game. He has not come back to a college job since then. He spent time in the NFL with Sean McVay on the Rams staff, which I know that's a lot of people have been pitching that to me as a real selling point here. Hey, he learned from one of the best offensive minds. And okay, well, I didn't really have a doubt that Scott Frost could put together an offense. I mean, I definitely saw him do that, obviously, at UCF. It's more like running an entire Power 4 program because, well, that's one of the things that has changed here. Like, not only is this counting on him not being the guy he was at Nebraska, but it's also like, hey, how much has the landscape changed and the UCF job changed since 2017? Like, quite a bit. This is not the American Athletic Conference anymore. You're in the Big 12. And jokes aside from the SEC folks that are probably still hanging around here, that's a step up. That's a step up in competition for him to do that. It's also an environment where NIL is much different than it was even 2 years ago when he was last coaching. Much different, right? I mean, NIL has turned into a much larger deal. 2022, we were kind of just starting to wade into that. Now now you basically need a GM. It's a different thing, different element for Scott Frost to be dealing with here. So that, I think, is like the tangible, like, I would be worried that, hey, we saw him as a Power 4 head coach and it was a disaster, a total disaster, unmitigated disaster at Nebraska. He's been gone for a couple of years. He has not been back in the college ranks since then. And you're trusting him now to recreate magic from 7 years ago when this was just a totally different game and UCF was in a different conference. I think that's a lot of risk. The other thing, I just don't like the general vibes with the nostalgia hire. And West Virginia fans, I will tell you the exact same thing about Rich Rod, and it sounds like decent chance that could happen. I would tell you the exact same thing about Rich Rod. That seems dangerous to me, to do the nostalgia play. I get it. When you're sad and lonely, you're laying on the couch at night, sad and lonely, it's very easy to pull out the phone and text your ex. I understand. I get it. You feel like you got nothing there, and you remember the good times, and like, man, it really sucks right now. We're 4-8. Remember when we were unbeaten? Remember when we were 13-0 and declaring ourselves national champs and pissing everybody off? That was great. What a time to be alive. What if I text Scott right now and just see if he's up, and you send that "you up" text? I get it. I get the appeal. I understand why that's tempting. I also understand that that's typically not the best thing for you. That is typically not going to be the best thing for everybody involved. And I say that as somebody who, yes, as a K-State fan and somebody who covered the team full-time for a decade, lived through K-State rehiring Bill Snyder. For the record, I was very much against that hire when it happened, and I have an article in the K-State student newspaper to prove it, where people got so mad at me for being vehemently against the hire that they told me they hoped that I died and cockroaches came crawling out of my eye sockets. True story. Somebody did say that in the comments. Vividly remember that from like 2009. I was against that. I think Bill Snyder's kind of a unicorn. I would not trust everybody to be able to do the Bill Snyder thing. I don't know. I think there's a lot of risk to it, UCF fans. I'm glad you guys are happy. I certainly hope it works out. I think it would be great for the league if it does. But I'm looking at it as an outsider, not nearly as optimistic as all of you guys are. This is swinging for the fences, dude. This is Adam Dunn. This is Adam Dunn, you know? He's going up there. He's going to hit 200 every year, but smack 45 bombs. Maybe this is one of those in the upper tank, but it could also be swinging your shoulder out of its socket at a curveball down in the dirt. Just saying. And West Virginia, like I said, Rich Rod, that could be it too. Please do not. Now, Rich Rod's a step above Jimbo. You are tying yourselves into an expensive disaster, Ren Baker, if you hire Jimbo. Doesn't sound like that's happening, though. It sounds like a lot of the buzz right now is around Rich Rod and Andy Kotelnicki. And what did I say about ball coaches? Andy Kotelnicki is that guy. That's a guy that I think is a ball coach, man. That's a guy that I think is a ball coach. Andy Kotelnicki would be who I would want hired if I were a West Virginia fan. But again, I think there's a lot of the nostalgia play going on there with Rich Rod and West Virginia. At least, though, Rich Rod, one, had some good years at Arizona after he flamed out at Michigan, or solid to good. And two, has been doing a good job at Jacksonville State. I think that at least makes me feel a little bit better about it. Okay, we are running long tonight, guys. I've got one more topic for you. David says UCF is in trouble with Scott Frost. Someone took his mojo. Sorry, I'm trying to make sure I don't get flagged for bad language here, David. So I'm just gonna say someone took his mojo. Some character from the Austin Powers movie series. That was Goldmember, right? I think, or was he in the whole thing? I don't know. Some character from the Austin Powers movie series took his mojo. Boy, Nebraska, you sure did. Now, I did read a Nebraska blog before I came on today to do the show that was saying, like, hey, my first reaction when I saw this was I laughed really hard. But then I did think, man, if that does work out at UCF, that's going to really suck as a Nebraska fan to watch that happen. So, Nebraska fans laughed, but also understood, like, hey, the way things go for us typically, maybe this would actually work out for UCF. Anyway, thank you, David. Thank you for being here. Robert says, now it's go JK, go Arizona State, go Big 12. Hey, I'm here for it. I'm on the Arizona State bandwagon. They are fun. It's really, unless you're an Iowa State fan, which understandably after the way things went, I can get how you wouldn't be thrilled about Arizona State. But look, my team lost to them a couple of weeks ago, and it's impossible not to like them. They are fun. Scattaboo is as fun as damn near anybody in the country to watch. And Dillingham is about as fun to follow as any head coach out there in the country either. So I don't know. Hard to say much bad about what Dillingham and Arizona State have going on right now. So I'm with you. I am with you. Belichick not interested in UCF. Oh, this Bill Belichick thing, man. Good luck with that. If anybody is trying to hire Bill Belichick, and obviously interviewed at North Carolina, for anybody who did not see that. Bill Belichick, college football coach with NIL in the portal. Seems like a match made in heaven, huh? Oklahoma State and Mike Gundy almost parted ways, but they decided to stay together. I'm glad this worked out because frankly, I don't think it would have been good for either side to break up. This is kind of like the anti-UCF Scott Frost take here, where I'm like, I don't know that that's great for either party to be getting back together. I don't think it's great for either party, Oklahoma State or Mike Gundy, to have split at this point. But he is coming back. There was a lot of drama surrounding this on Friday, like Friday night. sounded like Oklahoma State came to Mike Gundy with a restructured contract and some stipulations there, and he had to decide whether or not he was going to agree to it, but he did. He'll be back for a 21st season as part of the new contract. This is according to The Athletic. As a part of the new contract, Gundy is expected to be paid considerably less than he previously had agreed to, and the buyout structure of the deal is expected to change. His salary had been $7.75 million. He was the highest paid coach in the Big 12. That was 17th in the country. But his buyout was roughly $25 million if he was going to be fired. So that is a part of this. When I say I don't know that it would have been best for both sides to break up, a part of this is if Oklahoma State's having to foot the bill for $25 million just to fire Gundy and then have to hire somebody new, and then you're going into revenue sharing. That's a lot of finances for anybody to take on. And by the way, I don't think they're alone in that. Like Florida, I think that probably played a role in what happened there with Billy Napier and keeping him around. Gundy not only struggled this year, obviously we know he went 3-9, but remember the comments that he had that made people mad. He said basically the team's critics, the haters, were people that can't pay their own bills and are not taking care of their own job. That rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. That was reported in the story. Don't just take my word for it. That was reported in the story by The Athletic. But I'll just say this, man. Like if you're Mike Gundy, I wouldn't want to go out like that. Like a 3-9 season, the legacy you have at Oklahoma State, what you've done, I would not want to go out on a 3-9 season. He's competitive enough. He's not going to want to do that. Even if there's not another 10-plus win season in there, which every time you count Gundy out, it seems like there is. We did this 2 years ago after a 7-6 season. Almost, all these guys left in the transfer portal that offseason. Spencer Sanders left to go be a backup at Ole Miss. Trace Ford goes to Oklahoma. So many key defections from the transfer portal. Everybody assumed Gundy was done. He came back and won 10 games and went to the Big 12 championship. So when you leave him for dead, typically he's got another one in him. But even if it's not to the high levels that he's been before, I would think for his sake, like, you want to leave on a better note than 3-9. Even if you go back, I was like looking back through Gundy history. He had that stretch where he goes 7 wins, 8 wins, 8 wins, and you're like, all right, like are things kind of leveling off here? Well, then he was right before 2021, and then Gundy puts together the 12-win season where they come up just inches short of a Big 12 championship, and they win the Fiesta Bowl. So second 12-win season for Gundy at Oklahoma State after that point when everybody declared him dead, or at least thought maybe this is getting a little dull. In 2014, he went 7-6 in the middle of like his real heyday at Oklahoma State. And then he had 3 straight 10-win seasons. So, and on top of this, I would just say for Gundy's sake and the school's sake, I think it's this whole confrontation is going to be nothing but a good thing because change is needed to happen. Like you can't go 3-9 and think, yeah, well, just run it back. Status quo. Things are okay. Not at that program, the way it's been going. Clearly there were issues there. Something had been going on. So for Gundy to get a push here, if that's what it was going to take, even if it made him mad, if that's what it was going to take to get a push here, I think that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing. The defense was a disaster. I mean, injuries or not, I know Colin Oliver gets hurt and like the defense needs to be better than just the worst unit in the Big 12. If you're Oklahoma State, you should have enough talent there. So moving on at defensive coordinator, makes sense. The offense had quarterback issues. Maybe it was a mistake bringing Alan Bowman back. But, even beyond that, like they couldn't run the ball with Ollie Gordon. Like, the guy was the Doak Walker winner last year, and you can't run the ball with him at all this year. Things were wrong with the offense. There's got to be a fall guy. It was Casey Dunn who was the offensive coordinator, like I understand it. Make coordinator changes. Take a little bit less money. I mean, that'll help Oklahoma State. Maybe that doesn't help morale so much with Gundy, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. And then the other thing, obviously, that's been talked about a lot is pushing him to embrace NIL more, which he's not always been the most like gung-ho guy NIL-wise. So it's a good thing for both parties if you can get Gundy on board to be like, hey, dude, just do the NIL thing. Let the kids make the money. You may not love it. Even if you say publicly now that you're fine with it, you may not love it, but this is the world we live in. And if you're going to be our coach where we want to win at the highest level, you got to do it. That's going to be good for both parties. And I do think there's an element here for Oklahoma State. Fans won't want to hear this at all, but there is a little bit of like this, be careful what you wish for, if you're really wanting Gundy out. Now, if this really is it, and he's not going to adjust and, game passed him by sort of thing, then okay, and maybe that would be your argument. But man, that's a guy that's just won a ton of games and been about as consistent as anybody in college football over the last 20 years. You better be convinced that there's somebody out there that's going to be a great hire that can bring in a great staff if you are going to get rid of him, because he's just proven over the course of time to be a really valuable high floor commodity that also can give you the high ceiling seasons as well. So the high ceiling seasons are not coming as consistently as they once did, but they are still in him. And yes, like, you'll have to move on at some point. I feel like there are some similarities here to K-State and Bill Snyder. And eventually, yeah, you were going to have to move on and prove somebody else can win there. Like in the modern era for Oklahoma State, prove somebody else can win there. But it just felt a little too soon for me to want to just hit eject and bail on Mike Gundy there. I had to have Oklahoma State fans, just sake of transparency, and tell you where I'm coming from on this. I've had to had some of these conversations with the good folks on our Discord for the Three Mod podcast. People getting pretty negative on K-State football after the losing 3 of 4 to end the season, and worried about offseason and transfers and all that. And sky is falling, and, Kleiman needs to be out if he's not going to do this. And I have to kind of say, guys, like, I know none of you want to hear it. No one ever wants to hear the guy who's going to be like, hey, but the floor is high. I was like, hey, the floor is pretty high. And like, this is K-State. You're really rolling the dice if you're bringing somebody else in. And like, people seem to think Colin Klein is the next head coach. I think there would be a good chance of that if he is still available at that point, not as a head coach. That's rolling the dice, man, when you know that Chris Kleiman's a guy who you can basically pencil him in for 8 wins every year, unless there's a global pandemic. You can pencil him in for 8 wins. I had to do some of that talking here. I think there's some of that at play here for Oklahoma State too. So I would have been very leery of doing that. Now, some of the discussion was, which this is kind of the fascinating part of it. Like they were talking about, firing Gundy with cause because of those comments. I assume because of those comments, why they would be firing him with cause, why you could get away with that. And Gundy, that's, I guess, some of how you leverage Gundy into taking less money. So Oklahoma State wasn't messing around about like, hey, we need changes here. Like, stuff's got to get better and be different if you're going to stick around. I would say well played for Oklahoma State. I think this is the best scenario. You don't have to pay crazy buyout money, keep him around, give him another shot, and yet make some changes that'll help him, pull him along to modernize him. See what that pulls out of him, see what that does. I see you guys asking about West Virginia. I don't have any like crazy inside info other than it looked like the two guys that a lot of the search is centering around right now are Andy Kotelnicki, who is the offensive coordinator at Penn State, former OC, obviously, at Kansas, and Rich Rod. Seems like there's a lot of smoke around Rich Rod as well. So beyond that, I do not have any crazy inside information for you on the West Virginia coaching search. Okay, went long tonight. I think that's going to wrap it up for me. I appreciate everybody for being here. I have not promoted this enough. Open for Business Big 12 newsletter. We got a ton of people in here from Twitter. I know you guys like to read your news. I know a lot of you are Big 12 fans. If you want your Big 12 news without SEC or Big 10 bias, you don't want to have to wade through what a national college football story means for the Big 12. You can get it straight to your inbox 3 times a week, ofbnews.com. It's ofbnews.com to subscribe, or just click the link in the description of this video to get the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter. We've got almost 3,200 people reading it right now. So you can join 3,200 other Big 12 fans in reading the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter, ofbnews.com, or click the link in the description of the video. John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo. If you have a question or comment, if you didn't catch this live and you want it answered on the next show, you can certainly do that. Let's see. Like the video on your way out. That would be amazing if you could all do that for me. And I think with that, I will bid you adieu and wish you a happy Sunday night, happy start to your week. And I will be talking to you all very soon. Take care.